What would you do if someone knocked on your door when you knew you were the only one home? That question has been looping through Emily Carter's mind for years, ever since the night she swore she heard it. 3 slow knocks, each one heavier than the last, and when she opened the door, there was no one there. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. It started on a quiet October evening, the kind of night when the air outside feels still, too still, and the shadows under the streetlights seem to breathe. Emily was 17 then, a high school senior in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. Her parents had left for the weekend to attend her aunt's anniversary, leaving her alone in their 2-story home at the end of Maple Street. It wasn't the first time she'd been left alone, but it was the first time she felt alone, the kind of loneliness that hums, like the static of an old TV in the background of your mind. She turned up the volume on Netflix, trying to drown it out. The sound of laughter and chatter filled the living room, clashing against the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. At 9:37 p.m., the power flickered. Not the usual blink from a weak connection, no. This was slower, almost deliberate. The lights dimmed until the house was swallowed in shadows, then came back with a faint hum. Emily's phone buzzed. A notification. Front door camera, motion detected. Her heart jumped. They'd installed the camera last summer after a string of break-ins around town. She opened the app and froze. The feed showed her front porch. Empty. Just the faint light from the street lamp and the swaying of wind through the maple tree. Then, the motion alert blinked again. Something moved. Not fast, not like a person running. It was a slow, shifting blur at the edge of the frame, almost like the pixels themselves were warping. Emily frowned and leaned closer to the screen. The shape unfolded. It looked like someone standing, too tall, too still. The figure didn't have a face, just darkness. Then, 3 knocks. On the door. Emily screamed, nearly dropping the phone. The knocks were real, loud, right behind the wood of her front door. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. Silence. Her heart pounded in her throat. She glanced again at the camera feed. The porch was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. She backed away, her phone trembling in her hand. She told herself it had to be some glitch, maybe a neighbor's kid playing a prank. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching her. She tried calling her mom, but the call didn't connect. No service, not even Wi-Fi. Just a strange, low static in her ear, like whispering voices under the surface. She hung up. For the next hour, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The refrigerator hum seemed distant, muffled. Every sound felt like it was being swallowed by something unseen. At 10:45, she heard the footsteps. From upstairs. Slow, dragging steps, one after another. She froze at the bottom of the staircase, staring upward. The light from the hall lamp barely reached the 2nd floor, just enough to see the railing and the first few steps. Her mind raced. No one else has a key. No one else should be here. The steps stopped. Emily swallowed hard and whispered, "Hello?" No answer. She picked up the flashlight from the drawer, her hands shaking so badly the beam danced across the walls. "Mom?" She tried again, even though she knew they were miles away. A faint creak responded, like weight shifting on old wood. She slowly climbed the stairs, one trembling step at a time. Each footfall felt deafening in the silence. When she reached the top, she saw her bedroom door, half open, though she was sure she'd closed it. The flashlight beam trembled as she raised it. Inside her room, the air was freezing. She could see her breath. She stepped inside. Everything looked normal. The posters on the walls, the bed, the open window curtain fluttering slightly from the wind. Then she noticed her mirror. It was fogged up from the inside, and written across it, in a smeared line of condensation, were 3 words. Let me in. Emily dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning wildly. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over her own shoes, and ran out of the room. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She sprinted down the hallway, but halfway down, she heard whispering. A soft, overlapping murmur, like dozens of voices whispering her name. Ailey. Ailey. She turned toward the sound, and saw something standing at the end of the hall. A figure. Tall. Thin. Its head tilted slightly like it was curious. The same faceless shape from the camera. The hallway light flickered, and for one split second she thought she saw its face. Not human. Just darkness. A black pit that seemed to stretch inward forever. Emily screamed and ran for the stairs, nearly falling in her panic. She bolted down, but as soon as her feet hit the last step, she heard the front door unlock itself. Click. The door creaked open an inch. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying a faint scent of damp earth. And something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Emily grabbed her phone again, desperate to dial 911, still no signal. The static whispered louder now. She could almost make out words. You let it in. Her flashlight flickered, then died completely. The only light came from the porch, and from the faint outline of footprints forming slowly on the carpet. One step, then another, moving toward her. Emily backed up until her shoulder hit the wall. Please, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Leave me alone. The whispers stopped, and then silence. Her breathing slowed. She dared to hope whatever it was had gone, until the kitchen light turned on by itself. Flick. She could see it now, the shadow standing by the sink, tall enough that its head brushed the ceiling. It wasn't moving, just standing there, its body flickering like it wasn't entirely real. Emily backed toward the front door, fumbling for the handle, but when she turned it, the door wouldn't open. Something had locked it from the outside. Then, behind her, the whisper returned, right next to her ear this time. You opened the door for me. The lights went out, and Emily screamed, the kind of scream that doesn't sound human anymore. Emily didn't remember falling. One moment she was screaming into the dark, the next she was on the cold floor gasping for air. Her head throbbed, her vision swam in and out of focus, and for a long moment she couldn't move. Every inch of her body felt like it had been drained of warmth, of strength, of will. The silence was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs had stopped. Then came the whisper again, faint this time, echoing from somewhere deep in the walls. Emily, come upstairs. Her stomach twisted. The voice sounded so familiar, like her mother's voice, only slower, stretched out. Wrong. Emily sat up, clutching her flashlight even though it no longer worked. She pressed the power button again and again until finally, weak light flickered out of it. The beam was dim and trembling, barely illuminating the living room around her. The front door was still locked tight, the deadbolt turned all the way. She tried the handle again. Nothing. The metal felt icy against her palm, almost pulsing, like it was alive. That's when she noticed the photos on the wall, family pictures that had always hung above the stairs, her parents' wedding photo, her 10th birthday, summer vacations, were all different. The people were still there, but their faces were wrong. Their eyes were gone, replaced by smudges of shadow. In one picture, Emily's own face was blurred entirely, as if something had wiped her out of existence. She staggered back, her breath trembling. This isn't real, she whispered. This isn't. A loud bang came from upstairs. Something had fallen. Or been thrown. Emily's mind screamed to run, but her body moved before she could think. She climbed the stairs again, heart hammering against her ribs, each creak of the steps echoing through the house like a heartbeat. When she reached the top, her bedroom door was now wide open. The cold air was pouring out, heavier than before, smelling faintly of mildew and rot. Inside, her mirror was still fogged, but the words had changed. Now it said, "I see you." The letters dripped slowly, as if written in something wet. She stepped closer, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The reflection behind her, something moved. A shadow darted across the room, fast and fluid, disappearing behind the closet door. "Who's there?" she whispered, barely breathing. The closet door creaked, once, twice. Then it slowly opened. Inside, nothing. Just her hanging clothes and a pile of shoes. But there was a sound, a faint rustling like breathing, soft, shallow, right behind the coats. Emily reached out with a trembling hand, pushing the clothes aside. Her fingers brushed something cold. She jerked back, gasping, and the flashlight flickered again. In that single flash of light, she saw it. A face, pale and sunken, eyes black as ink, mouth open in a silent scream, staring back at her from between the hanging coats. She screamed and stumbled backward, slamming the closet door shut. She backed against the wall, clutching her flashlight like a weapon. Her whole body shook uncontrollably. For a few seconds there was silence, then slowly, a knock from inside the closet. Once, twice, 3 times. Her heart stopped. The same rhythm, the same knock, the same one she'd heard at the door. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She bolted out of the room, running down the hall and into her parents' bedroom. She slammed the door behind her and pressed her back against it, panting hard. The air here was colder still, like stepping into a freezer. Her breath came out in visible puffs. She flicked her flashlight around. The bed was untouched, her mother's vanity still filled with perfume bottles and jewelry. But something was off. On the nightstand lay a small music box, one she didn't remember ever seeing before. It was shaped like a small wooden house, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, looping lines and jagged triangles that looked almost ancient. And then it started to play, soft at first, a lullaby, slow, eerie, the kind you'd hear in an old child's nursery rhyme. Emily froze. She hadn't touched it. The lid creaked open on its own, and the tiny ballerina inside began to turn. Only her face wasn't painted. It was blank, completely smooth. The song played slower now, the notes warping into something darker, deeper. Each rotation of the ballerina's head seemed to twist more, until its neck bent at an impossible angle. Emily screamed and threw the box against the wall. It shattered, the song cutting off instantly, but the air didn't go quiet. Instead, the walls began to whisper. Dozens of voices, all whispering her name. Some low, some high, some sounding like her own voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. You let it in. You let it in. You let it in. Emily covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. Stop! Stop, please! She cried. But the whispers only grew louder, filling every corner of the room until it felt like they were inside her head. Then, they stopped, and a voice spoke, clear, right behind her ear. He's in the house now. Emily turned sharply, but no one was there, just the curtains swaying slightly in the breeze. Except, the window was closed. The curtains moved again, and this time something stood behind them. A tall shadow, motionless, but its outline wrong, like a person whose body didn't fit quite right. Emily's breath caught. Slowly the shadow began to move, stepping out from behind the curtains. The faint light from the flashlight touched it, and for the first time she saw its full form. Its skin was stretched, too tight over its bones, gray and thin like paper. Its mouth opened wide, but there were no teeth, just a void, a black pit that seemed to swallow light. It didn't move closer. It just watched her, tilting its head the same way it had in the hallway. Then it whispered in a deep, hollow voice, one that vibrated through her chest. You opened the door. Now close it if you can. Before she could scream, the lights exploded. Glass shattered everywhere. Emily fell to the ground, covering her head. When she looked up, the thing was gone, vanished like smoke. But the air wasn't empty. She could still feel it hovering, watching. And on the wall behind her, carved deep into the wood, were the same 3 words again. "Let me in." Only this time, something else was written beneath them. A 4th word, freshly scratched, dripping dark and wet. "Tonight." Emily's breath came out ragged. Her flashlight flickered out for the last time. From somewhere deep in the walls, the sound of scratching began. Slow, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging through wood. It moved along the walls, circling the room, closer and closer to where she sat. Then, silence. And a whisper, so close it brushed her ear again. "He's not outside anymore." The silence in the house wasn't real silence anymore. It was alive, pulsing, full of listening. Emily could feel it. It was as though the house itself was waiting for her to breathe too loudly, waiting for her heartbeat to quicken so it could move again. She sat perfectly still on the cold bedroom floor, clutching the broken flashlight in her trembling hands, listening to her own ragged breath echo back at her. It had written "tonight" on the wall. The word burned itself into her thoughts. The handwriting, no, the claw marks, looked too deliberate to be random, too human to be coincidence. Her shaking fingers traced the carved grooves in the wood, still slick with something sticky and dark. She pulled her hand back fast, bile rising in her throat. It wasn't ink. It wasn't paint. It was blood. Emily stumbled back, gagging, tripping over shards of the shattered light bulb. Her hands stung, small cuts forming where the glass sliced her palms. She wanted to scream, but the fear was so thick it felt glued to her throat. Suddenly, from somewhere below her, she heard the faint sound of the television turning on. Static first, then the soft hum of voices, far too low to make out the words. The living room TV. Her phone was still dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no lights. But somehow, the TV had found power. Emily crept downstairs, step by step, her bare feet whispering against the cold wooden floor. The house smelled different now. The faint rot had turned sharper, like burning wires mixed with wet soil. Every shadow along the hallway looked stretched and distorted, like something unseen had tugged at their edges. When she reached the living room, the television screen flickered in static. Lines of distortion rippled across the screen, forming shapes that almost looked like faces, dozens of them, blinking in and out, melting into each other. And then, for a split second, she saw herself, her own face, on the screen, sitting in that exact same living room, staring directly at her. Emily froze. The image twitched, distorted, then smiled. Her reflection smiled, but she didn't. Her real face was frozen in horror, while the version on the screen tilted its head and mouthed something she couldn't hear. She stepped closer. The static crackled louder. Her double leaned closer too until its mouth pressed against the inside of the glass and whispered, "He's behind you." Emily spun around, but nothing was there. When she turned back, the TV had gone black. Just her reflection now, dimly lit by the glow of the dead screen. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. Then the reflection blinked. She didn't. Her reflection blinked again, then smiled, slowly, wide, until its mouth opened far wider than any human mouth could. The glass began to crack. Hairline fractures snaked across the screen like spiderwebs. "Stop," she whispered, backing away. The cracks deepened. From the center of the screen, a hand pressed outward, stretching the glass. The skin was gray, thin, the fingernails long and black. Another hand appeared beside it. The screen shattered outward. Emily screamed and ran, shards of glass raining behind her. She didn't stop until she reached the hallway, and then she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own reflection, not in the TV now, but in the hallway mirror. Only it wasn't mirroring her. It was moving on its own. Her reflection tilted its head to the side, just like the creature had. Its eyes were darker than before, deep, endless black. It raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and placed its palm against the inside of the mirror. Emily, trembling, couldn't stop herself. Some part of her felt pulled. She raised her hand too, placing her fingers against the glass. The surface was colder than ice. The reflection smiled. And then, it spoke. "You were never alone, Emily." She stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling hard onto the floor. The mirror rippled, not cracked, not shattered, but rippled like the surface of water. Her reflection stepped forward, its form stretching, pushing through the glass. Its hand emerged first, dripping with black liquid that steamed as it hit the carpet. Emily scrambled to her feet, running into the kitchen. She grabbed the first thing she saw, the kitchen knife, and pointed it toward the hallway. Her heart pounded so violently she could barely see straight. From the hall, she heard the sound of something dragging across the walls. A slow scraping noise, nails or claws pulling deep lines into the paint. "Stay away from me," she screamed. "Leave me alone." The sound stopped. Then, a low voice from the darkness. "You already invited me in." The kitchen lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs popped. Small bursts of sparks. In the glow of the final flicker, Emily saw her reflection again. But this time, it wasn't in a mirror. It was standing in the room with her. It looked exactly like her. Same face, same hair, same trembling lips. But the eyes, they were bottomless voids. The doppelganger smiled softly. "You shouldn't have touched the mirror," it whispered. "Now we share the same face." Emily slashed at it with the knife. The blade passed right through, leaving behind only a wisp of shadow and a stench of burned air. The figure flickered and vanished, but its voice lingered. "It was never just the house. It's what's buried beneath it." Her knees buckled. She dropped the knife, pressing her hands to her ears, but the whispers returned. Not from the walls this time, but from inside her own head. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of a basement she didn't know existed, a trapdoor hidden beneath the old rug in the living room, chains, symbols, a ritual, people chanting her name. Emily gasped and stumbled back. No, this isn't real." The whispers hissed in unison. "It is." Her eyes darted toward the living room. The rug lay in the center of the floor, old and faded, edges curled upward like something had been moving beneath it. The moment she looked at it, the air seemed to thicken, pressing against her lungs. She took one slow step forward, then another. Her mind screamed to stop, but her body kept moving. She reached the rug and grabbed one corner, yanking it back. The smell hit her instantly. Damp wood, rot, and something metallic. Beneath the rug, half hidden under dust, was a wooden door set into the floor. A trapdoor, and carved into it. The same symbols that had been on the music box. Emily's hand shook as she reached for the handle. It was cold, like touching the edge of a grave. The whispers swelled again, overlapping, louder, desperate. "Don't open it. Don't open it. You'll let him out." But beneath the chorus of fear, one voice, calm, low, the same voice that had haunted her all night, whispered softly. "He's already out, Emily. You're just coming home." The trapdoor creaked. Slowly, it began to open, and from the darkness below, something breathed. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. The darkness below the trapdoor didn't look like normal darkness. It was thicker, like smoke that couldn't rise. It pulsed faintly, as if something inside was waiting for the air above to come down and feed it. Emily stared into it, frozen halfway between curiosity and terror, one trembling hand still gripping the edge of the open door. A smell crept out first. Wet soil, cold metal. A hint of something sweet and wrong, like fruit that had rotted years ago but still clung to a ghost of perfume. She gagged and pulled her sweater sleeve over her nose, but it didn't help. The air itself seemed to crawl down her throat. Somewhere under her, she heard the faint sound of water dripping. Plink, plink, plink. And beneath that, softer, like breath through teeth, came the sound of whispering. "Come down, Emily." She jerked back, clutching her flashlight. But the words weren't echoing through the room, they were echoing inside her skull. Her hands trembled violently, and yet she couldn't make herself close the door. The pull was magnetic, the same sick curiosity that makes people stare into an abyss and wonder how far down it goes. She found herself lowering the flashlight, aiming it into the hole. The beam caught wooden steps leading downward. Old, narrow, uneven. The kind that creaked under the weight of time itself. Beyond the first few, the light faded into a fog so thick it looked alive. Every part of her screamed not to go down there. Every instinct begged her to run out the front door, into the cold night, to anyone, anywhere. But something in her chest, a strange aching pressure, kept whispering that there was no escape until she looked. So she stepped onto the first stair. It groaned under her weight. The sound echoed unnaturally long, bouncing through the basement like the walls were breathing. She descended slowly, one hand trailing along the damp wall. Her flashlight flickered, the battery fading, and every time the beam dimmed, she thought she saw movement at the edge of the light. A shoulder, a hand, a face pressed close to the wall watching her. Halfway down, the whispering returned. But now it wasn't words. It was chanting. Low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Each breath she took fell into rhythm with it, until she couldn't tell which was hers and which belonged to the sound. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her skin crawled. When she reached the bottom step, her foot sank into mud. The floor wasn't solid. It was wet earth. The basement walls weren't brick but stone, black with mold and carved with the same looping symbols she had seen before. They spiraled everywhere, etched deep and rough, like someone had done it with shaking hands. Her flashlight caught movement. Something was scrawled across the far wall in long, smeared strokes. She walked closer, squinting through the dim light. It wasn't paint. It was writing. Old, desperate writing in dark red. She let him in. She became the door. Emily's knees went weak. She stumbled backward, tripping on something buried in the mud. When she turned to see what it was, she screamed. A hand. Human. Pale. The skin shriveled and gray, the fingernails blackened and long. It stuck out of the dirt like it had been clawing its way up and lost. Emily stumbled away, but as she did, her flashlight flickered and illuminated more shapes, more hands, dozens, some small, some large, all frozen mid-reach, like a crowd of the dead stretching toward her. Her breath hitched. Oh God, oh God. Then she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, from behind her. She turned, raising the dying flashlight. The beam caught the wooden stairs she'd just come down, but they were empty. Still, the sound kept coming. A step, then another. Closer. The steps didn't match the weight of a person. They were too slow, too deliberate, as though something was pressing its weight into the wood on purpose. The whispering rose again, louder now, spilling from the walls. The voices overlapped until they became one voice. Deep, male. You open the door. Now finish what she started. Who? She whispered. Who started what? Your mother. Emily froze. The word hit her like a slap. No, my mother's not. She was the first door. The voice came from everywhere. It crawled through her ears and down her spine. She turned in a slow circle, heart pounding. The air had changed. The fog that hung around her ankles had thickened, swirling as though moved by invisible hands. In the center of the room, something began to take shape. A figure. It rose from the earth itself, tall and thin, its skin the same color as the basement walls. The shape was wrong again, limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way. Its face was stretched smooth, eyes deep hollows. But as it turned toward her, A flicker of something familiar passed through it, like her mother's face flashed beneath the gray skin for a single second. "Mom?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Mom." The figure's head snapped toward her, and a sound tore through the room. Not quite a scream, not quite a roar, but something between the two. The ground shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Emily stumbled backward, falling against the wall. Her flashlight went out completely, plunging her into pitch black. The whispers changed again. No longer pleading. Now they were chanting her name. Emily. 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 The sound came from inside her head and all around her at once. The figure moved closer. She could hear its breathing now, slow, rattling like someone trying to remember how lungs worked. The smell of damp earth and old blood filled her mouth. Something brushed her hair. She screamed and swung blindly with her fists, connecting with nothing. She hit the wall hard and felt something crack beneath her palm. The stone shifted slightly, and a faint glow appeared from a narrow opening. She turned toward it. The light was faint, flickering, like candlelight. She crawled toward it through the mud, shoving the stones aside until the gap widened enough to see inside. It was a small chamber, a hidden one, lined with more symbols. In the middle stood a stone altar, and on it, an old leather-bound book covered in dust. The book pulsed faintly with the same dull red glow as the symbols on the walls. Emily reached for it, desperate for something. Answers, hope, anything. The moment her fingers touched the cover, pain exploded through her skull. Images flooded her mind again. Not hers. Memories that weren't hers. A woman kneeling in this very basement years ago. A circle drawn in blood. Candles flickering as she whispered an ancient name. A shadow forming behind her, rising taller and taller. And the woman's face, Emily's mother's face, tear-streaked, terrified, whispering the same words over and over. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to let you in." The vision shattered. Emily fell back, gasping, clutching her head. The whispers around her were hysterical now, screaming, begging, laughing all at once. The book slid off the altar and hit the ground with a wet thud. Its pages opened on their own, flipping furiously until they stopped on one. A drawing covered the page, a doorway carved into the shape of a woman's body, and beneath it, scrawled in red ink, "Blood opens what blood has sealed." Emily's eyes widened. She realized what the whispers had meant all along. Her mother had sealed something down here, something that was never meant to wake up. And when Emily opened that trapdoor, she hadn't just broken the seal. She had inherited it. From behind her, a voice whispered one last time. Quiet, almost gentle now. "Now you're the door." The earth beneath her shifted. The floorboards above groaned. The house itself seemed to sigh. Then, from the top of the stairs came a sound she would never forget. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And the whisper that followed wasn't inside her head this time. It came from the floor above, clear and cold. "Emily, let me in." The storm outside hadn't stopped. If anything, it had grown angrier, slamming sheets of icy rain against the windows as if trying to break its way in. Ethan sat huddled on the floor of the living room, staring at the flickering fireplace he had managed to light. The flames danced wildly, casting grotesque shadows across the walls, shadows that didn't always move the way they should. He could swear that sometimes, even when the fire was still, the shadows twitched on their own. His phone was dead. The power was gone. And somewhere deep inside the house, something was moving. It had been nearly 3 hours since he'd seen the woman. The apparition, her pale, trembling face reflected in the old mirror, still haunted his mind. Every time he blinked, he saw her milky eyes staring back at him, the corners of her mouth pulled into a faint, trembling smile that made his skin crawl. He thought about leaving, but the storm had turned the roads into black rivers. The front door wouldn't budge. It was as though it had swollen shut with the humidity, and the windows refused to open. He was trapped inside his own home. Then came the first whisper. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind, but no, it came from inside the house. A faint, shaky voice echoed through the hallway. "Ethan?" He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He turned toward the sound, every nerve in his body screaming for him to move, to hide. But curiosity, that cursed human weakness, made him stand. He took the flashlight from the coffee table and aimed it toward the staircase. The beam trembled as his hand shook violently. "Ethan?" The voice came again, softer, closer. He took a step forward. "Who's there?" His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Hello?" No reply. He walked slowly up the staircase, the old wood creaking beneath his bare feet. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing dust dancing in the air like tiny spirits. His breath misted in the cold. Each step felt heavier than the last. Halfway up, he heard the whisper again. But this time, it wasn't calling his name. It was singing. A childlike hum drifted through the hallway above him, a soft, eerie melody that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was the same tune his mother used to hum when he was a child to help him sleep during thunderstorms. He froze. That song was buried in his memory, long forgotten. How could anyone else know it? "Stop," he whispered to himself, clutching the flashlight tighter. "It's not real, it's just the wind." But deep down he knew the wind didn't hum lullabies. He reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner toward the master bedroom. The door was slightly open, creaking back and forth as if beckoning him in. The singing grew louder, gentle, almost soothing, but underneath it there was something wrong. The pitch wavered, like a broken record struggling to play a tune it didn't quite remember. Ethan slowly pushed the door open. The room was empty. The curtains fluttered from the open window, letting in the icy rain. The bed was unmade. The fireplace in the corner was cold and dark. But the song continued, though there was no one there. He turned his light toward the mirror on the far wall and his stomach dropped. The reflection showed a woman standing right behind him. Ethan spun around, but the room was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, she was still there, closer this time, her hollow eyes fixed on his. She lifted her hand and placed it against the glass, her mouth moving silently. The flashlight slipped from Ethan's grasp and clattered to the floor. The room plunged into darkness. He scrambled to pick it up, but as he did, the singing stopped. Silence swallowed the room. He felt a hand, cold and clammy, brush against the back of his neck. He spun around and shined the light wildly, panting. Nothing. Then, faintly, he heard the sound of scratching. It was coming from inside the walls. Slow, deliberate scratches. Something or someone was crawling through the narrow spaces between the plaster and wood. The noise grew louder, faster, until it seemed to echo from every direction. The walls trembled. Paint cracked and flaked. Ethan backed toward the door, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The scratching stopped all at once, replaced by a voice, muffled, distorted, whispering from behind the wall. "Let me in." He bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His footsteps pounded down the stairs as he sprinted toward the living room. His flashlight flickered again, once, twice, and then went out. He was plunged into total blackness. The only light came from the fireplace, but even that looked wrong. The flames now burned a deep, unnatural blue. They hissed and twisted like living things, and in the flickering light, Ethan saw something that froze him in place. There were footprints leading from the fireplace across the room, wet, muddy footprints that stopped just a few feet from where he stood. He followed them with his eyes, his heart pounding. They stopped right at his feet. He felt something wet drip onto his shoulder. He looked up. Above him on the ceiling hung the woman. Her long, dark hair dangled downward like ropes, and her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. Her mouth twisted into that same trembling smile as she whispered, "You came back." Ethan screamed and stumbled backward. The figure dropped to the floor with a sickening thud, landing on all fours. Her head twitched, her limbs moving with jerky, unnatural motions as she began crawling toward him. He grabbed the nearest thing, a fire poker, and swung wildly. It passed through her like smoke, leaving behind a trail of freezing air. She laughed, the sound distorted and inhuman. "Get out," Ethan yelled, his voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" Her laughter died down, replaced by a whisper so soft it felt like it came from inside his head. "You know who I am." Ethan froze. He shook his head violently. No, I don't." The woman leaned forward until her face was inches from his. "You left me here," she hissed. "You promised you'd never leave." Ethan's blood ran cold. The memories came flooding back. His childhood, the house, the accident. The sound of his little sister's scream as the old fireplace collapsed. The way his parents never spoke of it again. The way they moved out, leaving everything behind. The house had been rebuilt. But her room, the old playroom upstairs, had never been touched. Ethan realized with a sickening dread that the whisper in the walls wasn't new. It had always been there. He just hadn't been around to hear it. The woman's face melted away, revealing a pale, childlike form beneath. Her eyes glowed faintly as she whispered, "You forgot me, Ethan." And then she lunged. Ethan barely had time to react. The cold slammed into him like a wave. He gasped, collapsing to the floor as the air left his lungs. The fire roared higher, crackling blue and white. The walls shook, and the old clock on the mantel shattered. Then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, the room was empty again. The fire was out. The footprints were gone. But carved into the wooden floor beside him, written in jagged letters, were two chilling words. "I'm home." And from deep inside the walls, the whisper began again, soft, steady, and closer than ever. "Ethan." The house was silent again, eerily, impossibly silent. Ethan stood in the middle of the darkened living room, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. The words carved into the wooden floor still glistened faintly under the dying light of the fire. "I'm home." He couldn't look at them anymore. Every time he did, he felt something stir inside his chest, something heavy and familiar, like guilt that had never truly died. His flashlight was gone. The batteries in his phone were long dead. The air was cold, thick and heavy with the scent of damp wood and decay. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning flashing across the windows like jagged cracks in the night. He stumbled toward the kitchen, desperate for something, anything that made sense. He turned on the faucet. Nothing came out. He opened the refrigerator. The light flickered, then went out. Everything inside was covered in a thin layer of frost, as though the cold had seeped into every corner of the house. As he turned, he noticed something strange on the far wall. Faint fingerprints smeared across the paint. Small ones, children's fingerprints. They led out of the kitchen and toward the staircase again. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "Not again." But the house had already chosen for him. The footprints waited, leading him back upstairs. He climbed slowly, his legs trembling, his breath fogging in front of him. Every step creaked like a scream beneath his feet. The shadows on the walls seemed to lean toward him, twisting into faces that disappeared when he blinked. He could hear something faint behind the plaster again, scratching, tapping, a low whisper. It wasn't a single voice anymore. There were two. When he reached the top, he saw that one door at the end of the hallway, the one that had always been sealed shut since his childhood, was now wide open. It was his sister Lily's old playroom. The air that drifted out was icy cold, almost freezing. It carried a smell he hadn't sensed in years, a mix of dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet, like the scent of lilies, her favorite flowers. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long time, unable to step inside. The memories came rushing back. Lily's laughter, her small hands clutching his as they built forts out of blankets. The way she'd beg him to stay with her when thunderstorms scared her. And then the day it all ended. The day the fireplace collapsed. The day she screamed, and he ran. He had been only 12. He hadn't meant to leave her. But when the fire started, he'd panicked, bolting out into the storm. By the time his parents pulled her out from the debris, it was too late. She'd been gone, and though his parents told him it wasn't his fault, he could still see the look in their eyes, the quiet resentment, the unspoken blame. Now, standing in that doorway, it felt as though time had never moved at all. The room looked untouched, like a photograph frozen in time. The little wooden rocking horse still stood by the window. The dollhouse sat on the rug, covered in a thin layer of dust. Her drawings were still pinned to the walls, faded but visible, scribbled pictures of flowers, animals, and a small house with 2 stick figures holding hands. Ethan stepped inside. The air was colder here than anywhere else. Each breath burned in his lungs. His footsteps echoed unnaturally as though the room were much larger than it should have been. He knelt beside the dollhouse, brushing dust from its roof. The tiny front door creaked open by itself. Inside, the miniature rooms were furnished perfectly. Tiny chairs, beds, and even little mirrors. But when he looked closely, he saw that inside one of the miniature rooms, there was a tiny figure, a small porcelain doll with black hair and cracked cheeks. Its eyes were missing, replaced by empty hollow sockets. The doll's mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. Suddenly, the door behind Ethan slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. He jumped up, spinning around, but the door wouldn't open. He banged on it, shouting, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No answer, only the whispering. It began softly, like a lullaby. Then it grew louder, spreading through the room, overlapping voices, children's laughter and crying all mixed together. The walls began to shudder. The drawings on the walls peeled and fell to the floor one by one. He turned back to the dollhouse and froze. The tiny rooms inside were changing. The dollhouse was no longer just a toy. Its walls were now flickering with moving shadows. Inside, Ethan could see miniature versions of himself walking through the living room, the kitchen, the stairs. It was his house. Every room, every detail, exact. And inside the dollhouse version of the living room, he could see a small, ghostly figure standing by the fireplace. "Lily?" he whispered. The doll's head turned toward him. Its jaw moved, and though no sound came out, Ethan heard her voice echo inside his head. "You left me here, Ethan?" He stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No, I didn't. I tried to help you, The dollhouse began to tremble violently. The walls cracked, and the tiny furniture toppled over. Then, with a deafening snap, the dollhouse split open. From inside, a thick black mist poured out, swirling around Ethan's legs. The air filled with the stench of burning wood. The whispers grew louder, almost screaming now. And through the darkness, the faint outline of a small girl appeared. Her skin pale, her hair singed at the ends, her eyes glowing like dying embers. Lily. She stood only a few feet away, staring at him with that same trembling smile he'd seen on the woman earlier. Only now he understood. The woman in the mirror wasn't someone else. It had always been her. His sister, trapped, growing older in the darkness, becoming something else. "Lily," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry." But her expression didn't change. Her head tilted to one side. "You said you'd stay," she whispered. "You promised." He took a step forward, trembling. "I didn't mean to." The floor cracked beneath his feet, splitting open with a violent boom. The room twisted, the walls stretching like melting wax. The sound of a child's laughter filled the air, but it was distorted, unnatural. Ethan stumbled backward as the floorboards split apart, revealing something beneath them, a staircase leading down into complete darkness. From that abyss, cold air rose up, carrying the faint sound of whispering, hundreds of voices overlapping, calling his name in different tones. Ethan. Ethan. Come home. Lily's pale hand reached out, pointing toward the hole. You can still stay, she whispered. Down there. With me. Ethan backed away, shaking his head, but the ground tilted beneath him. He lost his balance, falling toward the opening. Just before he plunged into the darkness, he grabbed onto the edge of the floorboards, his fingers scraping against splinters. He dangled over the void, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Below him, he saw faint, flickering lights, like candles burning in the dark. And in those lights, faces began to appear, dozens of them. Children, pale, lifeless, watching him silently. Their lips moved in unison. Stay, Ethan screamed, pulling himself up with all his strength. As he did, something cold grabbed his ankle and yanked. He kicked wildly, shouting, No, let go. His foot struck something solid. There was a scream, high-pitched, unnatural, and suddenly the grip loosened. He crawled away from the hole just as the floorboards slammed shut, sealing it completely. The room went quiet again. Ethan lay there on the cold floor, shaking, gasping for air. And then from somewhere behind him, he heard a child's voice whisper softly, almost kindly. You can't leave, Ethan. The house remembers. The air grew colder. The lights flickered again. And for the first time, Ethan realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted by his sister. It was haunted by every child who had ever lived here. Children who had vanished, their souls swallowed by the place long before him. And he had just opened the door for them to come back. The storm had quieted to a dull murmur by the time Ethan stumbled out of Lily's room. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled violently. The house was breathing now. He could hear it. The floors creaked like ribs expanding and contracting, the air wheezing through unseen cracks as if the very walls were alive. He could no longer tell if it was exhaustion or madness clouding his mind, but everything felt distorted. The hallways looked longer, darker, unfamiliar. The wallpaper rippled as though something beneath it was moving, crawling. And behind every corner, he felt her, them, watching. His thoughts blurred as he made his way downstairs. He needed to get out. He had to leave before the storm ended, before the night was over. He didn't know what sunrise meant for this house, but deep down, some primal instinct whispered that if he was still here when the morning came, he'd never see daylight again. He reached the front door and twisted the knob. It didn't move. He slammed his shoulder against it. Once, twice, again. Nothing. It was as if the wood itself had fused with the frame. He grabbed a chair and swung it at the window. Glass shattered, but instead of air rushing in, there was nothing. Beyond the broken glass was pitch-black emptiness, an endless void that swallowed the shards mid-air. He stepped back, gasping. What the hell is this? Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate, descending the staircase behind him. Ethan turned around, his pulse pounding in his ears. On the stairs stood Lily, but she wasn't alone this time. Behind her were others, children, all pale and hollow-eyed, their faces twisted into blank, lifeless expressions. Some were burned, some were bruised, some looked half-faded, like smoke trapped in human form. They were all watching him. Lily stepped forward, her voice echoing in the silence. You opened the way, Ethan. You let us out. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. I didn't mean to. I didn't. You promised, she whispered. You said you'd stay with me, but you left, just like they all did. Lily, please. Ethan's voice cracked. I was a kid. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. Her eyes flickered, part human, part something else. You should have been scared for me. The lights flickered violently, bursting one by one as the temperature dropped. Frost spread across the windows and floorboards. The air turned to mist. Ethan's breath came out in sharp clouds as he stumbled back toward the fireplace. Suddenly the flames roared back to life, but not red. The fire burned black and blue, the flames hissing and twisting upward like serpents. Inside the fire, Ethan could see images, memories, children playing, families laughing, birthday candles, then screams, fire, darkness, and a house, always standing, always waiting. Lily's voice cut through the roar of the flames. It never ends, Ethan. The house remembers every soul that enters. It keeps us. It feeds on us. Ethan shook his head violently. No, this isn't real. You're not real. But then the floor beneath his feet shuddered, the walls splitting open like wounds. From the cracks poured that same thick black mist. It crawled up his legs, cold and heavy like liquid shadow. And from within it came voices, whispering, chanting his name. Ethan, stay. Ethan, forever. He fell to his knees, clawing at the mist as if he could rip it off. The more he fought, the tighter it clung to him. His vision blurred. For a second, he thought he saw his parents, standing in the corner of the room, pale and ghostly, their eyes hollow. His mother's voice broke through the noise, gentle and soft. You shouldn't have come back, sweetheart. Mom? His heart clenched. I didn't know. I wanted to see home again. This isn't home, she said, her voice trembling. It never was. The house groaned, deep and thunderous, shaking dust from the ceiling. The children began to fade, one by one, their outlines flickering like candlelight. Only Lily remained, standing at the edge of the fire, her eyes glistening with something that almost looked like sadness. Lily, please, Ethan whispered, crawling toward her. Tell me what I have to do. How do I make this stop? She tilted her head. You can't stop it, Ethan. The house wants one thing, a soul to stay. That's how it survives. That's how it keeps the rest asleep. He stared at her in disbelief. You mean, I have to stay here? She nodded slowly. Someone always has to. The realization hit him like a knife. That was the reason the haunting never spread beyond the property. The reason the town had forgotten this place existed. Every time someone entered, the house claimed them. It sealed itself again, waiting for the next. No, Ethan said, standing up, his voice trembling. I won't be your prisoner. Lily's smile faded. Then they will all wake. As she said it, the walls began to crack open further, and the black mist surged out, forming shapes, faces, hundreds of them, screaming silently. The air filled with the sound of breaking glass, cracking wood, and shrill laughter that didn't sound human. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over the rug. His hand brushed against something, metal, the fire poker. He grabbed it, eyes wide, staring at the black flames in the fireplace. Maybe the house fed on fear, on life, but maybe fire could destroy it. Maybe if he burned it all down, the cycle would end. He lunged toward the flames, plunging the poker deep into the heart of the fire. There was a deafening scream, not from Lily, not from the ghosts, but from the house itself. The walls buckled, the floorboards cracked open, the ceiling split apart, raining dust and debris. The fire exploded outward, a storm of black light. Ethan was thrown backward, slamming into the wall. Everything was chaos. The whispers turned into shrieks, the air burned, the world dissolved into color and noise. And then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying outside. The sky was gray, the storm gone. The house stood before him, smoke rising from its windows, its roof partially collapsed. It looked smaller now, older, defeated. He pushed himself up slowly, his body aching. For the first time in hours, maybe days, he could hear nothing but the wind. No whispers, no voices, just silence. He turned toward the trees and started walking. Each step felt heavier, like his body didn't belong to him anymore. When he reached the edge of the property, he turned back one last time. The house stood still, its charred frame silhouetted against the pale morning light. And in the upstairs window, he saw her, Lily, smiling. He froze. She raised her hand and waved gently, the same way she used to when he left for school. Then she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Ethan felt something inside his chest twist. He looked down and saw his reflection in a puddle near his feet. His skin looked pale, too pale. His eyes, faintly gray. He gasped, stumbling backward. No, this can't. The wind picked up again, carrying with it a faint whisper. Someone always has to stay. And as the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, the door of the ruined house creaked open by itself. Ethan turned toward the road, ready to run, but then stopped. His feet wouldn't move. His body wouldn't obey. He felt the ground beneath him soften, the world tilting slightly, as though gravity itself were pulling him backward. The whisper grew louder, closer. "Welcome home, Ethan." He tried to scream, but his voice was gone. The world around him dissolved into gray mist, and the last thing he saw before everything faded was the house rebuilding itself, brick by brick, window by window, standing whole again, as if nothing had ever happened. And in the living room, reflected faintly in the mirror above the fireplace, a new shadow appeared. A man, standing alone, watching, waiting. Ethan had become the house's new keeper. And from that night on, the old house on Raven Hill stood quiet again, peaceful, abandoned, waiting for its next visitor. But sometimes, when storms roll over the valley and lightning flashes across the windows, neighbors swear they can see a man standing in the window, staring out into the rain. And if you ever get close enough, if you dare to listen carefully through the howling wind, you might just hear it. Soft, distant and chilling. "Welcome home."